So like I said, my name is Joel Saupe. I am a web developer at Deseret Book. And I hope you guys aren't sick of accessibility yet. So today my talk is called Accessibility is More Than Just Screen Readers and ARIA. So I think to start, what I want to do is just kind of go through, at least this is what my journey into accessibility was. And I don't know if you guys have kind of similar experiences. But for me, you know, it started like going to a conference talk similar to this. And then like you learn about all these different disabilities like that Jen has talked about, and you realize, you know, hey, there's all these people and they have these problems, and you know, is my site that I'm working on, is that really accessible to all these people? And so you start doing some Googling, right? And so you look up accessibility and you find all these standards and all these acronyms, and you're just like super intimidated when you start getting into like all these web standards, right? Because it's kind of ironic that all of the accessibility standards are pretty unaccessible. And so it's really daunting when you just want to get into accessibility and help all these people, but it's just scary, right? And so then you look and you start finding all these other resources where it's just like Accessibility 101, just like the layman's terms, to give you like just like a general guide on like this is what accessibility is. And so these kind of things, they really help, right? Kind of get you started, and then they tell you about the ARIA, right? And like you've seen the ARIA stuff, and like maybe you like use Bootstrap, or like you've even in a code base and you see all these ARIA props on all your stuff, so you like wonder what those are, and then you learn them, right? So now like you've got a pretty good grasp on what accessibility is and like how you can add ARIA to things, and like so you figure out how to like use a screen reader, you download the Chrome extensions, right? And great, like you're having all this fun, and then you just like throw an ARIA around on all your code, and you think you're making the world accessible, right? And you totally are. But then you start finding more articles that are telling you that, hey, you know what, all that ARIA stuff that you've been adding might not actually be accessible, and it turns out that maybe people that are using keyboards, that might not be the way they're actually going to be using it, and so if you just follow the guides like the way it is, then you know your app might not actually be as accessible as you think it is. So then you kind of have to step back and say, like, you know, like what really is accessibility? And you know what, like, and so you kind of have to step back and like they've said, like accessibility starts out as a design problem. And because I mean that's when you realize that like all of like ARIA is not going to solve all of your problems. If you start out with a design that's unaccessible, like ARIA just won't be able to fix your problems for everything. And so then you realize that screen readers, like that's not also like the only use case or the edge case that you're trying to solve with accessibility, right? So there's a great quote by Steve Ballmer, and he says that accessible design is good design. It benefits people who don't have disabilities as well as people who do. Accessibility is all about removing barriers and providing the benefits of technology for everyone. So I think that as developers, that's kind of what makes accessibility hard for us, is that accessibility, like design, is subjective, right? So what's helpful for one person might be like intimidating or might be like not useful for another person. So the more that that you try to like make your site accessible, like the more you realize like there might be clashing things for other people, and so like your job is to like make it as accessible as possible and hope that you can cover everybody's bases. But you know that might not be the case, and you might not be able to make your site 100% accessible. And you know we've actually been doing accessibility for a long time. Like I don't know if you guys remember, like for the last few years, we've had this big push, right, to do mobile first, right? So we're going to develop and we're going to build our mobile experience first, and then everything else is going to be adaptive, and it's all going to like kind of figure itself out, right, on the desktop. And I mean, when was the last time you used a website that on your phone that wasn't mobile friendly, right? It's not a good experience, and that's an accessibility thing, right? Like you have all these users that are trying to access your website on the phone, and if they can't because it's not mobile friendly, like that's an accessibility issue, right? So this is something that we've been doing for years, and we got all, like, and think about how much better the internet is today because we did this push to make everything web or mobile friendly. So really, since that's just an accessibility thing, like we did mobile first design, and now I think now that we're all kind of got the grasp of it, our product managers have the grasp of it, and like it's not something it's not really a feature they ask for, it's just something that's expected nowadays. So now we can move on to what's called accessibility first design, right? So this is where like we focus on accessibility first, right? Sort of like what Tommy said earlier, that accessibility isn't something that you can just like tack on at the end. Like that's Bravo Sierra, right? Like you got to do it at the start, and it's got to be like a part of the design phase. So really, like what is accessibility first design? It's that, right? Like when we're building our features, like we're asking, like when somebody comes to us and asks for a feature, like accessibility, that's the first thing we think about. And so so Jen covered this a lot, right? Like, so we have all of these different disabilities, and I think, at least in a lot of conference talks that I've listened to and like articles and stuff, like we cover a lot on the left column, right? So the people with permanent disabilities, and we don't really realize that like there's all these other kinds of disabilities that we face, right? Like people with the temporary disabilities or situational disabilities, and those are the kind of things that each and every one of us face on a daily basis. And the numbers don't lie. Like if you're worried about like going back to work and telling your boss like, hey, like we learned about all this accessibility stuff at our conference, and we need to make our things more accessible. Like that might like sound like they'll be like, man, like who are we really going to be helping of our users? But when you take into account all of the people that have permanent, temporary, and situational disabilities, like there's a significant portion of our user base that face these challenges, and if we don't take them into account, like we're losing our users, right? So what I want to do for the rest of this talk, right, is to just go through some examples of real world situations and apps that have these accessibility issues, right? And then kind of go through what solutions they found. So first one I want to start out with is Twitter. I don't want to start a theme war, right, between the light and the dark theme. But like have you ever been like out in the middle of the day and it's sunny, right, and you're trying to use a dark theme app and you can't read anything? Like I have that problem all the time, right? Or it's the middle of the night and you try to open your phone and you just get blasted by the light from a light theme app. Like these are problems, right? So what Twitter does is they let you choose, right? Like if you want to have the light theme, like you can have the light theme, great. And if you want to have the dark theme, you can have the dark theme, great. Or even better, what they do is they actually let you just set it so that they'll switch to automatically by sunset, right? So when it's in the middle of the day and you're standing out in the sun, like you get the light theme, so it's easier for you to read the text. And then when it's the middle of the night, right, like you're not blasted by the light because they automatically switch to the dark theme. So that's accessibility, right? That's making their app better and more enjoyable for their users. Another one is YouTube. So like YouTube is all about video, right? And video is audio. But you know what? There are times that you can't listen, right? Like maybe you got your kid, he's sleeping next to you, and you don't want to wake him up, or you don't want your spouse to know that you're looking up a how-to tutorial on how to change the light bulb, right? So there's times that like you got to watch this video, but you can't really listen to it. And so what YouTube did is they do like computer science stuff, right? And they'll actually figure out, like they'll do their best guess at auto-generating subtitles. What this does is it makes it so that everybody in any situation can enjoy a video, whether they can hear it or not. And I mean, it's not perfect, right? Like, but they'll kind of tell you, they'll dim the font and show you, like, I don't know, man, I guess this is pretty close. But it gets you close enough that it makes the video experience like that much more enjoyable. So another one, like flying is super stressful for a lot of people, right? Because like you're going through security, Maybe you got kids with you, or you've got like your luggage, you got to pull out like 5 different laptops. And so air travel can be super stressful, right? And so there's a lot of room to make your app more accessible and more enjoyable, to improve the experience, right? Because that's really all accessibility is about, is to make our users' experience more enjoyable. And so like this is great, right? So we have this mobile boarding pass, right? How many times have you been at the airport and internet connectivity is not that great, and then when you show up at security and you see this, where the little QR code like is just like loading, or it's blank, right? And that is like super stressful. So like in that kind of situation. Sorry, I dropped my mic apparently. Anyway, sorry guys. So, right, this is super, like that's like my worst fear when I'm flying, is that I'm gonna get up to the TSA guy and my ticket's just gone, right? So like as developers, you can say, hey, like, you know what, this is critical in this moment that our users have this piece of data, like we can cache that, right? We can save that image, so that the first time they get it, like now they have it, and then anytime we can always have a fallback so that they never miss out on their ticket. And then you know what, like a lot of times when you fly, like sometimes you have to take a red eye, or your first flight was canceled, right? And so you're like in the middle of the night, and you're trying to save battery on your phone, right? And so there's a lot of times that you dim your phone, right? Because you're trying to keep your lights down. And I mean, this is a situation that can be in any case, right? That the lighting is poor. And so actually, like, the United app will, when you get up to when you open up your boarding pass, they'll actually, like, override your dim settings and then auto make it so it's, like, super bright. And they do that so that, like, when you actually get up there to scan it, like you're not like struggling to like scan it because it can't read it because the light contrast is so bad. So that kind of thing, that's an accessibility thing, right? They're making it so that no matter what your dimming preference is, like the time that you really need to scan your ticket, like they make it so that you're going to be able to scan your ticket and you don't have to stop and think about it. So there's a thing called negativity bias. And this is sort of unfortunate for us as developers, right? Because you might work super hard on features, and you do like all these super awesome things, right? But one tiny thing that's wrong with your app, like that's what users focus on, right? Like you might have this super cool form, but like if they can't click on a label, like that's a thing that they're going to keep telling you about. And I think it can be hard, right? Especially when you look at it from an accessibility point, that you want to make your app as good as possible, and then you're going to have all this negative feedback, and really, like I guess, so you want to focus on building this great experience for our users, and it's like all of these things that we just talked about, all of these examples, those are really tiny things that like most people just like you wouldn't notice, right? Like you open up your United app and you go and you go to scan your ticket, like you don't notice that like they just changed the lighting, right? But if you'd gone up to the ticketing booth and tried to scan it and it didn't scan, like you would remember that, right? And that's the kind of thing that users remember. Or like users remember that like they have to turn up the audio on their YouTube video so that their spouse can hear them looking up their tutorials, right? So those are the moments that you remember, and those are the kind of bad experiences that users will have with our apps and projects that will deter them from coming back, right? And so, you know, our apps will never be 100% accessible, and that's like, I guess like we wish that there was just like a clear cut, like this is how you do things. And that like once you implemented it, you could write all these tests and be done with it, right? And say like, great, my site is 100% accessible. And you know what? That's just never going to be the case because it is subjective. But the thing is that that's okay. It's okay that our like as long as we're trying to put ourselves in the shoes of our users, then that is what's going to help us make the internet better. For every ARIA prop that we add, for every time that we like focus on some sort of accessibility, and we put ourselves in our users' shoes and try to figure out where they're actually using our apps, like those are the times that when we stop and think about each of those times and situations, if we just put that little bit of effort into it, the better our stuff's going to be, right? And whether our users actually notice these things, like that's like, you know, that's almost better, right? Like we don't want them to have to think about when they're using our app. They don't want to have to think about like the problems that they have. They just want to use it and they want to get on with their lives. And so the more accessible we can make things, then the better the lives of our users is going to be. All right, guys, that's all I have. So if you guys want to see the slides, you can access them at sau.pe/A11y. Does anybody have any questions? All right, thanks.